The first time, I didn't even get to appeal. I was arrested. I had only arrived in the hotel when early that morning they came to say that there was a room inspection. They asked me if I practiced Falun Gong. I said yes, and then they took me away.
She was held for 2 weeks and sent back to Guangzhou. She then went to appeal again, was arrested again, and then again. After the third trip, Zhou was sent to the Chateau labor camp in Guangzhou for 2 years, and then transferred to 5 different special facilities for transforming practitioners, black jails.
You can call the black jail. It's not legal jail. It's just modified school, warehouse, any place you can find.
Zhou described some of the torture she suffered at a black jail in the Huangpu district of Guangzhou.
In the beginning, they would take a bucket and fill it with water, and handcuff you and hold you upside down, and immerse your head in the water. This would happen twice a night, starting at midnight, and they would do this for a few hours, and then leave you there with water all over your body. And someone would stand next to you and ask, "So, are you still going to practice?" Afterwards, they took off all my clothes and continued with the same torture. They even used plastic toilet brushes and steel brushes to scrub your body. During this, they would do other things to torture you, like pouring cold water on you and other things. After going through this, because they took my clothes off while torturing me, and because I still didn't give in, they called everyone in for a meeting and forced them to criticize me and say how shameless I was.
Zhou later filmed reenactments of some of the torture methods she suffered while in custody. She also documented all of the different torture techniques used on her over a period of 4 years. In total, she listed 34 different torture methods.
They would also beat you in many different ways. They would use sticks, brooms, or wires. Because I was often beaten, my whole body would be black. They would then use thick steel wires to beat me and would leave a red mark on my black skin. It was very painful, like my skin had been split open. It was very, very painful. They would also use wasabi to put on your eyes. Or, on a hot day, they would close all the windows and put 2 thick blankets on you and tie you up like a dumpling for a long time. They would not let you down for a long time. It was very hot, the hottest time, and you would sweat. They wouldn't give you any water or food. Sometimes they would give you food and water to make you excrete more into the blanket, and it would become very smelly. All they were thinking was how to make it more unbearable for you. They would also use cigarette pipes to hit you on the head. At that time, my brain felt. When I pressed it with my hand, it felt soft. Underneath, it feels like there's liquid inside. You feel your head now, it's hard, but at that time, it felt soft. Also, when they were talking to you, all of a sudden they would start pulling a chunk of your hair, pulling on the scalp. At that time, I often had patches of my hair that were missing. They would rip down a whole patch of hair. Then they used another method, force feeding every 2 hours. They would force feed me 1 big box of food and a lot of water. They would have you sit in the corner and constantly force feed you water and tea. and have you immersed in your own urine, because when you are force-fed so much food, you need to excrete, so it would be smelly. They did this constantly, and my clothes were all wet. At that time it was very cold. In autumn, I think, around November or October, I felt very cold. One time I had my period, and there was a patch of red on the ground. This is what they did. They just left you there in your own feces and urine. At that time, they had exhausted all their methods of torture, especially in the end. They had one method called leg tying. This was one method they thought was very useful, but it didn't work on me. After they tortured me with it, I started to vomit whenever I ate or drank something. So under these circumstances, they let me go home.
After coming home, Zhou decided to leave China and applied for a passport. But before she could escape, she was taken back into custody for 7 months. After again being tortured to the point of death, she was again released. After spending 4 months recovering at home, Zhou eventually fled to Singapore and Malaysia, before gaining asylum in Indonesia. Li Wei-shun is a former Red Guard and Communist Party member. After the persecution began, she appealed 3 times at the provincial and national appeals offices.
At Tiananmen, the environment there was very tense. The public was all nervous, and the patrolling police would ask anyone they see, "Do you practice Falun Gong?" After I evaded them, we asked around about how to get to the appeals office. And after we found out, we went there. When we arrived, before we even set foot in the appeals office, when we were a distance from the front door, 4 or 5 people surrounded us. They asked, "What are you doing here? Do you practice Falun Gong?" We said yes. We wanted to tell the government about the situation. Then they didn't let us explain any further and separated us. My younger sister and another fellow practitioner were separated from me. We were then put into a car and taken to somewhere I didn't recognize. Only when we arrived did I find out that it was a basement for the Liaoning provincial office in Beijing. The public security officials were all there. After we went to the basement, there were rooms on both sides, and they were filled with Falun Gong practitioners. At that time, I was really surprised. Then our bags, clothes were all searched. We had to take our clothes off, and they searched them. What I remember most was that there was a newlywed couple. The girl's family name was Zhou. The police, after they arrested people in the morning, at night they would drink alcohol. After they finished drinking, they would have fun by beating the Falun Gong practitioners. The painful cries from the beatings lasted all night. The newlywed couple, the husband was beaten on one side, and they told the wife to go over, and they asked her how she felt when she heard her husband's cries. It was, you felt that they had no trace of humanity. It was like thugs and evil. I don't know what words to use to describe it.
After being released, Li appealed 2 more times and began distributing pamphlets about Falun Gong locally. But as the pressure increased, she was forced to leave home to avoid arrest.